to order. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Cobain?
She is absent tonight.
She's absent out of town. Mr. Micko?
He will be arriving here very shortly.
Ms. Stachek?
Here.
Mrs. Hausum?
Here.
We have 3 present, which is a quorum.
Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda are strategic priorities. Our district has developed and is currently engaged in a 3-year strategic plan which reflects the values, beliefs, and hopes of our students, staff, parents, and community. There are 4 strategic priorities to the plan: transforming teaching and learning, aligning staff and resources, cultivating culture and climate, and leveraging funding and facilities. Our strategic priorities give actionable focus to our district's purpose and mission and guide the work of our strategic plan. Next, we have public comment. There are no slips for public comment. Item C, approval of minutes. Motion to approve regular board meeting minutes from April 25th, 2024. All district video and audio recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes. We're going to go out of order here a little bit and come back to the 5-year forecast once Mr. Micko gets here. Dr. Ribe, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, we'll go down to item F, which is the business services report. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to purchase software for the visitor registration system from Raptor Technologies not to exceed the amount of $30,258 for 3 years of service. Then you can see in parentheses how much that'll cost throughout the agreement. Funding to be from the safety grant AG fund in year 1, then funding will come from the general fund unless additional safety grant dollars are available, and this requires a vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Motion by Ms. Stachek, second by Mrs. Bissell. Any discussion? Do you want to give us some background?
Sure. So we have a visitor management system. So this is when you come to any of our buildings, on the iPad, you scan your license, you put some information in, and it goes through a variety of databases to ensure that anybody that's coming in through the secure vestibules is actually a parent, has a purpose to be there, and is safe. And so we have decided to go with a different visitor management system. We're currently with Envoy. We've been there for a few years, but based on some usability of it, Mr. Breckner has done research on 2 other products and felt like Raptor best met those needs. Raptor was a product we had years ago. It was kind of just coming out with visitor management. So in terms of the functionality, the user interface for the visitors, as well as it provides the same level of security and background and references against the list to keep folks out of the building that shouldn't be in the building. So we feel this is a good product for our visitor management system moving forward.
And it'll be up and running for the new school year?
It will actually be up and running later this month, pending the approval. So Envoy, the contract ends in May, and so this will be replacing it. So it will be up and running before the school year is over.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? All right, George, you want to take the roll?
Sure. Ms. Stachek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Micko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. Motion carries.
Are we okay, Mr. Micko, if we just go through the business items, or you want to go back to the 5-year forecast?
Why don't we finish the business items, and then I appreciate everyone's courtesy. When it's raining, 71 does not cooperate in any way, shape, or form. So let's continue, and then we'll come back to the 5-year forecast.
Sounds good. So next, under the curriculum report, we have one item for potential graduates. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the list of potential graduates be approved to participate in the Strongsville High School commencement ceremonies next Sunday on May 19, 2024. Final approval is contingent upon successful completion of all requirements for graduation, and the list is attached. The second item is a revision to a service agreement that was previously approved. So Be it resolved upon my recommendation that we revise the agenda from December 7th, 2023, as stated there, that there's a new total amount that has been increased to $17,664.53. And again, these are pass-through funds for Holy Family School. Any questions on curriculum? I'll then turn it over to Jenny for the Human Resource Report.
Thank you. Under Human Resources, of the following items for your consideration, we have the resignation of an administrative staff member, resignation of a certificated staff, resignation for non-certificated staff, retirement for a certificated staff member, appointments for certificated staff, and finally, unpaid leave for a certificated staff member. And that concludes my report.
And so I do have a discussion item under my agenda, but we'll get to that after the 5-year forecast. So, Mr. Miko, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. It is that time of the year. Twice a year, we do have to approve a 5-year forecast. Much has been discussed about our 5-year forecast recently. It is not a perfect tool by any means. You don't have to go far to find people who find fault or criticism of our 5-year forecast, but it is the tool that we have. And while it may be an imperfect tool, it is the tool that we have, and it is the tool that we must, by law, use. Every 2 years, or twice a year, every 6 months, we need to review it. And then as a board, we need to approve it and submit it to Columbus, and that's part of our job. So we take it seriously. And like I said, none of these tools are perfect, but it is the tool we have. So we'll engage in the process as well as we can and as honestly as we can, so that it is as good a tool as it can be for us as we make our decisions. With that said, nothing occurs in a vacuum. We were on the ballot twice for a renewal of an existing levy. We did not earn the support of the community twice, and so as a board, we need to decide what to do for the upcoming November election. We do have some deadlines on that, so this, in my mind, is the beginning of the process. The 5-year forecast is not going to make decisions for us on what we as a board decide to do, but it certainly will inform those decisions, and it will be part of the basis for the board to make those decisions. And so the board doesn't make those decisions in a vacuum. We have some seats available and open, and with the concurrence of the board as a whole, we sent out some invitations. We sent out invitations to our finance committee, which makes sense. We sent out invitations to our facilities committee, which I think works in tandem with our finance committee. And we sent out invitations to the Strongsville GOP's finance committee. I don't know if we've ever done that before, but we've done the invitations because it's important that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. So I'm just going to pause and thank the people in the audience, and if there are any representatives from those committees who want to join us now, and or if questions come up. This is a public meeting. We have Mr. Benson recording it for us, and he is always challenged to make sure any questions and answers are recorded and heard well for those in the audience, along with those watching at home, along with those who watch these meetings over and over again on YouTube. So again, at any time, any of those members of any of those committees, if you do want to join when we get to the question and answer period, please join us at the chairs available. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our treasurer, Mr. Anagnastu, and we are ready for the 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I am, if it's okay with the board, to go to the podium just to get closer to the screen to point out some visuals. And as Mr. Miko stated, thank you to all that, from the various committees that were able to join us tonight. Looking for a productive meeting. As also Mr. Miko stated, the purpose of the 5-year forecasts and objectives are to engage the local Board of Education and community in the long-range planning and discussion of the financial issues facing the school district, to serve as a basis of determining the school district's ability to sign and certificate contracts required by the Ohio Revised Code, 5705.412, commonly known as 412 certificates, and to provide a method for the Department of Education and the Auditor of State to identify school districts with potential financial problems. The forecast methodology, this forecast is prepared based upon historical trends and current factors. This information is then extrapolated into estimates for subsequent years. The forecast variables can change multiple times throughout the fiscal year, and while cash flow monitoring helps to identify unexpected variances, no process is guaranteed. The intent is to provide the district's financial trend over time and a roadmap for decisions aimed at encouraging financial stability and sustainability. As Mr. Miko said, no model is perfect. It's kind of an imperfect tool, as the information here can change tomorrow or whenever as the variables change as we receive information, but they're prepared with based on the most current, and the assumptions are based on what we have available at the current time and what we know. And also at each month end, at the second meeting of each board the second board meeting of each month, I'm also comparing on how we close the fiscal month, or the month of the fiscal year in comparison to the 5-year forecast and how it's trending out the rest of the year. So we are monitoring it month to month and looking at any variances that occur throughout the year. The forecast contains four contents: the major assumptions, then the general fund revenues, general fund expenditures, and then the 5-year forecast summary at the end. The major assumptions, our first largest revenue category is property taxes, and a particular drive that is the collection rate. And what that is, the county sends out the bills, and then those bills are collected through the county and sent to us. Not 100% of the bills that are sent out are paid, so we factor in a collection rate. We factor in a gross collection rate, which also includes prior delinquencies. The forecast assumes a 98.46% gross collection rate, which is the 3-year average of calendar years 2021 through 2023. The gross collection rate did increase to 99.26 in calendar year 22 compared to 2021 of 96.85, and has stayed consistent in calendar years 2023. So if that trend continues, then property taxes might be a little bit higher than what's being forecasted. Another factor into the revenues is the assessed valuations. For a current year, we normally receive those at the end of December. For collection year 2024, what we're in now, the total valuation is $1,883,471. During collection year 22, that was a triennial budget year for Cuyahoga County. Residential values increased by 15.74%, and commercial values increased by a net of 1.59% through the valuation. However, commercial values decreased by 2.2% through change in class, for a total decrease of 0.61. During collection year 23, residential values increased by 0.48%, while commercial values increased by 1%. And collection year 2025, which is next collection year, in December, we'll receive new valuations. The county started doing meetings throughout the county. 2025 is a 6-year update year for the county. There's a 3-year update and then the 6-year update. The 3-year update happens in between of the 6-year update. And what they try and do is bring the values back up to the market values of the homes. In conversation that I have with Cuyahoga County, the numbers haven't been released yet, but they are telling communities throughout the county to expect anywhere between a 25% to a 30% increase in values. I'll get to how that impacts the the tax rate in a few slides. But the forecast does now assume, based on those conversations, a 27% increase in valuation. We'll receive the actual number hopefully by the end of the summer, going into the fall, and what that is. But right now, based on those preliminary conversations, we have put a 27% increase for the valuations. That's just for residential. For commercial, the forecast assumes a 2.38% increase in commercial, which is based on the average of the last two 6-year updates. And then the last triennial update occurred in tax year 2021. The next triennial update will occur in tax year 2027, which is 3 years from now. And the forecast assumes a 10% valuation increase in residential property for the next triennial update. And that is based on historical averages of the previous triennial updates. It's based on conversations that I've had with the county auditor's office, and then also in other professional developments that I've been sitting in with other treasurers. They're anticipating that these values are going to continue to increase as the home market remains hot, and if the Fed implements any rate cuts, they're just anticipating for home values to continue to increase. And then public utility. During collection year 2023, the values increased by 6.39%. During collection year 2024, public utility increased by 1.14%. The forecast assumes an annual increase of 5.52% increase, which is the historical average from tax years 2024 to 2023, a 10-year average. As I stated, with the 27% increase in the valuation, how does that impact homeowners? The first thought is values are going to increase by 27%, or my tax is going to increase by 27%. Is the district going to receive that much more revenue? The answer is not really, due to House Bill 920. As values, as you can see in the chart, as values increase, the tax rate decrease, so we're still getting the same level of funding as we have received from previous years. We will see an incremental increase in inside millage, as that is not applied to House Bill 920 and the effective rate. This graphic here shows historical data versus increases, assessed valuation increases, and then how it impacted the tax rate. So in tax year 2018, there was a 10% increase in valuation, and concurrently in tax year 2018, there was a 7.72% decrease in the tax rate. In 2019, there was these are tax years, so in tax year 2019, there was a 17% increase in the tax rate. That was for the 2019 renewal levy. Then in 21, there was a 15% increase in the values, and then currently there was an 11% decrease in the tax rate. So as the tax rate has been going up, as the values have been going up, the tax rate has been going down. And then the projected district values versus the tax rate. In 24, projecting a 27% increase in valuations, which would drop the effective rate by 17.91%. And then in 2027, a projected 10% increase in values, which would drop the tax rate by 7.35%. And then finally, this chart here shows where the full tax rate is, the effective rate, and the floor. So what's important to note with House Bill 920 is as values increase, the tax rate decreases, but there's a floor where it can decrease too. So once it hits 20 mils, it can no longer decrease. At that point, as values increase, then it is a straight tax increase, because House Bill 920 is no longer out of play. Where the district currently stands is our full voted rate is 83.68 mils. We are currently at 35.66 mils in residential effective rate mills. With the 27% increase in valuations, that will drop that rate by 6 mils to 29.27%, or not percent, 29.27 mils. And then in 2027, with a 10% increase, the effective rate will decrease to 27.11 mils. So as the values are increasing, we're getting closer to that floor. It's a trend that's happening around the state where as values have been going up throughout the state, some areas a 50% increase, they're hitting the floor. And then as those values continue to increase and those districts are hitting the floor, they are seeing larger tax increases. Because of it, they're hitting the floor, and that House Bill 920 is out of play. Right now, we're not being impacted, but we're kind of getting close to that. The gap is closing from where we are now to that 20 mil floor. Does that make sense?
Clear as mud. I will share, and I think we all discussed this quite a bit. The issue currently affects rural districts disproportionately in the state of Ohio. And so if you go to any rural districts, this isn't just, hey, this could become something that's going to affect us 5-10 years down the road. This is a real issue happening right now. Historically, if you look back, House Bill 920 was passed in 1976, which is a historic period of high inflation. And so the legislature felt compelled to respond to it and created House Bill 920, which in effect kept those increases, mitigated those increases, created an incredibly complicated, difficult, and convoluted system that is very difficult to explain. You have inside millage of 10 mils, you have a 20 mil floor, you have reduction factors, you have all of those things. The one thing I find fascinating is if you look at what the voted millage is, the voted millage in Strongsville is over 80 mils, which means over time, whether it be the school district, fire, property tax levies, the library, our metro parks, county health and human services, all of those add up to 80 mils. But because of inflation and increases in valuation and House Bill 920, our effective tax rate is 27, 28, 29.
And we're currently at, before the impact of valuation, we're at 35.66.
So more than, again, the effective millage has been cut more than half. But if you pay attention to what's going on in Columbus, this is a real issue, and it would be very surprising for the legislature not to respond in some way.
Right. And then just to clarify, this chart here is just school district tax. And also to that, what's happening across the state, House Bill 920 is not in play consistently throughout the state, in the sense of some school districts are impacted by House Bill 920, others are already on the floor. So when you hear of certain counties where they're getting a 50% increase in tax value, and then that school district or their tax bills are going up by 50%, it's because they're on the floor. Where other communities, there's still room for them not to be on the floor, so as values go up, their effective rate goes down. But the gap is closing for us, and this bar graph assumes that the renewal levy is in play too. So if it's not, then it just brings it closer to that floor. Any questions? Anyone else? Continuing with revenues, just keep this in there because it's part of the historical statements. The forecast assumed that in collection year 2022, commercial property decreased in assessed valuation by $42 million due to the sale of South Park Mall. During April of 21, the mall was valued at the county at $181 million and sold for $57,000. Prior to the sale, South Park Mall filed a complaint with the Board of Revisions requesting a value of $60 million, a decrease of $121 million or $42 million of assessed valuation. Additionally, the forecast experienced a tax refund of $2.5 million in fiscal year 22, with the majority attributed to South Park Mall for tax years 18, 19, and 20. The reason I bring that up is when you look at the statements for those years, you'll see a decrease then an increase in the following year, that is the reason why. And then we have 2 renewal levies. The first one in May of 2019, residents approved a 5-year, $5.9 mil levy with the collection beginning in January of 2020. The forecast assumes the levy will expire in December of 2023, and collections will continue through December 31 of 2024, which is this calendar year. And then also to point out, since the levy hasn't passed yet, the county is preparing as I stated in the last meeting with the tax rate resolution, the county is preparing our amended certificate this year with the levy expiring. So assuming it's not there, so when we receive our certificate, half the levy will be there, as the last half of the calendar year is the first half of the fiscal year for 2025. And in November of 21, residents renewed a 5-year, $6 mil levy with collection beginning January of 2023. The forecast assumes the levy will expire in tax year December 31, 2026, and collections will continue through December 31, 2027. State funding, beginning in fiscal year 22, the state implemented a new funding formula, the state fair funding formula, and with the beginning of this fiscal year, there was a new biennium state budget. For fiscal year 24, we saw an increase of $574,000 and $405,000 in 2025 for a cumulative increase of $979,000. And as of now, the district is still considered a guarantee district in this fiscal year and beyond. With the state funding formula, there is restricted aid. This year, we're receiving about $764,000 in restricted aid. Next year, it will be decreased to $489,000. The reason for the decrease is we received $244,000 of one-time funds for the textbook ELA adoption. It was a subsidy. And then the remaining amounts, $243,000 for success and wellness, $37,000 for career tech and English language learners, $54,000 for disadvantaged pupil impact aid, and $183,000 for gifted education. And this is a new slide that I've put in the forecast. It's the changes between the November forecast compared to the current forecast for May. Overall, for revenues, for this fiscal year, our revenues are about $1.5 million better. Property taxes contribute to $651,000 of that. The first line, general property taxes, $753,000 netted against tangible personal property of minus $117,000. The difference there is, one, the collection rate, and then also for the tangible personal property tax, we had forecasted a 6% increase in values, and only a 1% increase occurred. And with tangible personal property, there's no effective rate, it's just based on the actual tax rate. State aid, an impact of $69,000. We received the one-time funds for restricted aid, and then our unrestricted aid decreased by $207,000 for the transportation reimbursement. And then other revenue, about $728,000, $500,000 for interest, additional interest. We're going to finish the fiscal year close to $2.5 million, and then catastrophic costs is about $100,000 more than what we had estimated, at close to $600,000. For the out fiscal years, next year, $838,000. A good portion of that is increase in interest income, and then 2026, about a $2 million increase. $1.2 million of that is the new values occurring, the gain from the inside millage. That will gain from there. And then 2027, about 1.2. Again, the difference there is the gain from the inside millage. And then in 2028, it's a combination of the gain from the current inside millage plus the 10% projected increase in values for those years. Expenditures. Any questions on revenues before I move on to expenditures? General fund positions, fiscal '23, we had 701 positions in the general fund. This year increased by 24 positions, and then next year it's anticipated an increase by 35 positions due to positions coming over from to the general fund from expiring ESSER funds. Healthcare premiums, we had a 3% increase in fiscal year '21. For fiscal year '22, we experienced a 1.37% increase. For fiscal year '23, we experienced an 8.7% increase. For fiscal year '24, we received a 15% increase. And then just recently, we received our premium increase for next year. And some good news there, it's only a 3% increase. Originally was factored in as a 10% based on the 15% that we received this year. So that was a good savings to the forecast. For the out years, because of the volatility, we've gone 8%, and then we increased it by 10% due to the last 2 years where we saw an 8.7% increase and a 15% increase. This time just using a 5-year average just to see how close that works due to the volatility. And that 5-year average is about a 7% increase. So that's what we factored in for the additional years, a 7% increase in healthcare. So hopefully it comes within close to that range, but it's just been volatile the last few years where we received the 1, then an 8, the 15, now down to 3. So the good news is the premiums are based on our claims. So it all depends on how we're running. We're putting measures in place to try and run as best as possible, looking at our plan design, also initiating some wellness factors as well to have employees do more preventative care to find if they have any issues early on. But it's based on our own experience and our claims, and what I've seen is kind of roller coaster. Sometimes it goes up, it goes down, and it just cycles. Purchase services, you'll see a decrease by close to $2 million in fiscal year 21 to 22, and then it increased again after 22. That was due to the implementation of the fair funding formula. In the past, we had to put the pass-through dollars that we received for charter schools and other non-publics. We received the revenue from state funding, and then through purchase services, we had to book the expense. So that's in the historical, but we no longer have to account for that. We did see an increase during 24 of $494,000, and next school year we're seeing an increase of $938,000. Half of that is due to the mobile leases that the board approved that will go into effect for next fiscal year, and then also utility cost increase and increases for special education students that are placed in different facilities, as we've seen a few more students being placed. Materials and supplies is forecasted to increase by $1.8 million from this fiscal year, from last fiscal year. The primary reason for that is the textbook adoption that we approved at the last board meeting. $1.2 million of that was from the new mandate for the highly qualified instructional materials from the state, where we had to do a new ELA textbook adoption for elementary schools, and plus our normal textbook adoption was about $800,000, which was about $400,000 more than budgeted. Last year we did only spend $250 in textbooks, so part of last year's budget was carried over into this year. But comparing the 2 years, the increase for material and supplies is the textbooks. And then same thing with expenditures. What changed in the forecast from November to now? Overall, for this current fiscal year, about $136,000. Seems like a small number, but in different categories, it makes up the difference. Salaries is trending about $483,000 less, as I've been stating through my monthly reports. We've had a lot of open positions throughout the year where employees have been or a lot of classified employees have been vacating positions. They have been sitting open, as well as we've had some leaves with certificated staff as well. Benefits, $313,000, which is correlated to the salary, to the open positions. Purchase services is only about $67,000 less. Materials and supplies, $1.2 million more, which is due to the textbooks. Capital outlay, about $20,000 less. Other objects, about $62,000 less, which is the county auditor fees. And then operating transfers out, $600,000 less. We had the transfer in there for the Kinsler HVAC, which will now be combined with the critical repairs that the Facilities Committee has been working in their plan. So that is just being put on hold, and a portion of that budget was transferred to the textbooks to use to pay for the textbooks. And then in the out years, next fiscal year, about a $256,000 decrease. Personnel services, about $499,000. We've had some retirees this year and replaced them with lower staff. There was a savings there. Benefits through all the years. The change in with the only 3% increase for the upcoming year had a cumulative effect for each year. So so that savings adds up each year, where next year we'll experience a $715,000 savings, then a 1.2, a 1.7, then a 2.3. Purchase services, $500,000 or $600,000 increase, which is primarily due to the mobile units and special education placements, and then also utilities increase as well. Materials and supplies, about a $300,000 increase. $200,000 is increasing the textbooks budget based on what we've been experienced this year. Is the textbooks are costing us more, especially with a lot of the online licenses. They're just more costly than they were in the past. So any questions on the changes? All right. Moving on to general fund revenues. It's a nice bar chart or a pie chart of our revenues. Our majority of our revenues, 73%, or $66 million, come from local taxes. 18% come from state funding. About $9 million is from the fair funding formula, and then $6.4 million is from the state share of the local taxes, which is the homestead and rollback credits, and then 9% or $8.3 million is from other operating revenue. And then how it kind of looks year over year. Between last year to this year, the revenues were overall slightly higher, and then this is without renewal. So as you'll see, with the renewal levy coming out, that the property tax revenues will decline. State funding will slightly incline, and then other revenue will decrease by $610,000. And then this kind of shows it as with the renewal levy in there, where revenues will have a slight growth based on the property tax increase for the value for the inside millage. This chart that I like, it was part of our 5-year forecasting tool and presented it last time. It kind of looks at growth in revenues versus inflation. Historically, our average growth in the 5-year forecast period, our average growth in annual revenue was about 4.48%. It's primarily due to the 2019 levy. The average annual growth is 3.46%. Over that same period, the annual inflation rate, the CPI, is 6.12%. So we're under that. And then the 5-year projected average increase, our annual increase in revenue, or average annual increase in revenue in the 5-year forecast is 1.6. The average growth is 1.23%, and the predicted annual inflation rate is about 3.6%. So our revenues are staying consistent while the inflation is increasing. And then these are just the graphs with the revenue sources. 2024 revenues or property for local taxes about 61.6 million. And the 2025 is about 61.6, kind of consistent. 2026, the growth for the inside millage to 63.3, 2027 63.7, and 2028 64.6, assuming that the renewal levy is approved. If not, it's the orange chart that, or the orange part of the bar graph that would come off. Public utility, as the increases there are the historical increase of the 5.52%, which is factored in the forecast as well. State foundation, The decrease in 2022 is due to the pass-through dollars due to the change in the funding formula where the pass-through dollars are no longer part of the forecast, or part of our revenues, and then there has been some slight growth with the implementation of the state funding formula, where this year we received $400,000, next year we'll receive about another $400,000, and then the out years, it assumes the same level of growth. Restricted funds, those are the state restricted. The increase this year was due to those one-time dollars for a portion of the ELA reimbursement. The homestead and rollback, that's been pretty consistent. The renewal levy piece is the orange part of the bar graphs. Other revenues, those make up of preschool tuition, full-day kindergarten, tuition from other districts, interest income, sports pay-to-play, special education, catastrophic reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement, and revenue and payment of lieu of taxes or TIFs. We saw an increase this year as our interest income is about $600,000 more than last year, about $2.6 million. For next year, I have it about 2.2, and then slightly decrease in the out years. The reason for the decrease is from what I hear from our advisors, that the feds are supposed to make 3 rate cuts this year and future rate cuts as well, and with a possible decrease in fund balance, that we might see a decline in interest revenue based on the rate cuts. So we'll continue to monitor that and make adjustments as necessary. Other financing sources, the increases in the past years, those were due to BWC refunds and rebates. Those were one-time dollars. The amounts for the future years, those are for advanced returns from other funds that we do at the fiscal year for reimbursable grants. We can't, those funds are reimbursed a month after they're spent by the state, and we just can't end the fiscal year with negative balances, so we have to do an advance out to those funds. When they receive those dollars, we advance them back in, and it's in this line here. Any questions on revenues?
I do, George.
Yeah.
Your CPI is your guesstimate.
Yeah.
Where are you coming up with that number?
Brett, can I ask you, so that we get it on the record?
All right, so I'll wait till the end. That's my thing.
For expenditures, same bar chart. 82% of our costs is in personnel, $70.8 million. Salaries are $49.4 million, while benefits are $21.4. Projected purchase services are $7.5 million, and other projected expenditures are $7.8 million. Expenditures last year were that light green bars, that's the $25 million transfer that we did to the 070 fund. Exclude that, as you will see, expenditures in each category have been increasing every year. Salaries have been increasing, benefits have been increasing, purchase services have been increasing. So every year you kind of see that same level of trend as the increase. Salaries, same trend last year. From 2021 to 2022, we saw 4.67%. In 23, we saw 4.03%, and this year we're seeing a 4.58%. Next year, about a 7%, which is a combination of the increases with the COLA plus the additional positions. In 26, about a 4%. And then 2027, 28, about a 2% as our forecast is based on the contracts that are currently defined now as those expire, so it doesn't assume any new increase until those actually happen. Benefits, same trend. On 2021, we had a 1.7% increase based due to the percent of healthcare. 2022, 4.67. 23, 6.67. This fiscal year, 24, an 11% increase. 2025, 10%. A lot of it has to do with the new positions coming on, plus the 3% of benefits. Then 26, a 6%. Then the 2 out years, a 5% increase. Purchase services.
George, before you go any further,
Yeah.
as far as salaries and benefits are concerned, can you go explain your process for computing that? Do you just take an average and multiply, or how do you actually do that?
No, so I go by person to person. So I have I have 3 spreadsheets, one for each type of employee group, certified, classified, and administrative and leadership. And it's kind of like a position control almost. I get from Jenny's office all the positions that we have in the district, who's in those positions, what the positions are looking like for next year. If it's vacant, I'll put a placeholder for a vacancy. I have each person in there, I have them tied to the salary schedule. So each year, that person moves through the salary schedule that's impacted, that's moved within the forecast. The salary schedule is based on what's currently negotiated. So if each year there's a change of the salary schedule, that's already factored in there. If the person's moving a step, then they're moving a step. And then I also go through on what benefits they're on. Are they on family care, single care, or no health care? We have employees that opt out. And then also determining the rate. I take our current rate, and then I multiply that rate by now the 7%. So kind of come up with that premium for the next 5 years. So that person, so I have the predicted cost for that individual person to that level, then it's rolled up to these numbers.
And so for example, benefits, you're assuming whatever benefits they have now, they're going to continue.
Correct.
You don't add anything saying, hey, we have a young staff, they're going to get married, they're going to grow their family or whatever. If they're single, they stay single for the forecast. If they're married, if they have a family, they stay that throughout the forecast.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because it changes. Some people go from single to family. Others I've seen go from family to single. Kind of go both ways.
But again, you're not doing an average, you're not doing an estimate. You're literally going person by person and saying, for the next 5 years, this is where they're going to move on the pay schedule. We have an existing health insurance benefit, and we're averaging currently, you said 7%.
Yeah.
And so you have that and it flows through. It's not just saying, hey, I'm going to guesstimate that my wages and benefits are going to increase by this percentage. It's a whole lot more exact.
Yeah,
The spreadsheet's pretty involved.
Yeah, I'm going through all 700 employees. When I'm doing the forecast, I'll download through our payroll system what benefit plan they're on, and then I'll go person by person to see if there was any changes. And same thing with salary. I'll download their pay rate and compare each time to see if there was any changes. As people could move columns, so I make those adjustments as well. But I'm looking at person by person and where they're currently at on the salary schedule.
Do you do any predictions on education attainment?
We do have a $200,000 placeholder in there in general, because that's been our average.
So
I don't have it by individual
It's
person,
based
it's
on
just-
an average, saying every year
Correct.
in general.
In general.
What else can you share with us as far, because wages and benefits are 80% of our budget, right? So the more rigorous we are with that calculation, the better we are.
Right.
Anything else you can share with us on how you come up with that number?
Yeah, so it's really, that number is tied to every single person in the district right now. If there's a vacancy, like even now, we have known retirements for next year. So I've taken those known retirements. They'll get 3 pays for next fiscal year as our pay is stretch pay. They'll be paid during June, 2 payrolls in June, and 2 payrolls in July and 1 payroll in August. So those 3 pays will be carried into the next fiscal year, and then assuming that they're replaced with a new employee. When we have that, right now we don't know who those employees are yet. So we put in a vacancy. If we do know who those employees are and we know where they're going on the salary schedule, I'll put them in there. But we usually, when we have a vacancy, I'll put about a BA5, and then assume family health. They might not take it, but that's the worst case scenario, is the family health. So I'll build those factors in, and then when we do the forecast in November, we'll actually know who those people are, and we can kind of plug them in. You were going to say something?
The last question, your method, your system, is there anything you don't like about it? Or again, we
No,
don't
it's
have a
pretty-
crystal ball. Is there anything you wish you would have better information on, or that's as good as we
I mean, the only
reasonably
thing I
can
wish I have
get?
is throughout the year, we've had a lot of people that leave, for that either resigned or took leaves that create savings. So if I would know that in advance, but that's, like you said, you need a crystal ball to know that. Those people don't even know that they're leaving when we're doing this. So that's kind of the one unknown as we're doing this is, and Jenny could attest, is she doesn't know how many leaves she's going to get throughout the fiscal year, or who's going to resign, and how many openings that we've had. I think this year, my 9 years of the district, might be the most that we've had since I've been here. So
I
and then
appreciate
filling
it.
those vacancies have been, we've had custodial vacancies open that Save's been carrying on for months. So same thing with transportation and other positions as well. And then also throughout the year, I think at the middle school, we've added aides throughout the year too, due to the needs and the staffing needs that are occurring there. And then the other thing that we don't know right now that could impact the forecast in November is based on staffing, based on student needs, on what enrollment's looking like over the summer, is are we going to need to increase positions for either special education, intervention specialists, or elementary school based on class sizes. So those are kind of like the unknowns that we don't know, but we go with what the information we have now.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I mean, it is, to kind of wrap it up, it is a pretty intensive process that takes about a couple weeks for me to go through when I'm doing the forecast, to go kind of person by person to see where they're at.
So, and the board knows that. And when we take the time to say thank you for all the hard work, it's because you're not just saying, hey, I'm gonna do a 4% increase, or I'm gonna average it and then just take the current number and increase it.
Right.
You're getting a little more laser focused. The price is the time,
Right.
which we thank you for. The benefit is I think we can we can feel safer about the decisions we make based on those numbers.
Right. So purchase services, the decrease in 2022 was due to the change of the fair funding formula. And then the increase in the out years were the increase of services going up in 2023. We had a 12% increase, or $789,000. This year, about a 7% increase, or $494,000. Next year, $938,000 increase, and that's half of that is due to the mobile unit lease that will be coming on, and other increases for related services and utility increases, and the risk insurance increase. And what makes up purchase services are utilities, contracted transportation, risk insurance, CCIP that the students take, special education placements, legal fees, occupational therapists, and our nurses. Those are the bulk of purchase services. Materials and supplies, the big increase this year is the textbooks that we've kind of just talked about. Looking at about close to $2 million in textbooks for this year, and then next year we'll see a decrease, and that decrease again is due to the textbooks, as they were just a one-time larger expenditure for this fiscal year. Capital outlay, kind of consistent year over year. In 25 to 26, there is about a $107,000 decrease. We had increased the technology budget by close to $200,000 this year and next year for a PC monitor refresh throughout the district for teachers, and then also our phone systems needed updated as well. So that budget will go back to where at previous levels in 2026. Our general fund debt, we do have a debt that expired this year. That's out of the general fund. In 2008, we had a House Bill 264, which was, at the time, those were popular for electric improvements. The final payment was in December, so that's off our books. And then our last debt payment that's in the general fund is from a 2006 school improvement, which expires of December 1st, 2035, and that was for renovations at the preschool. Other objects, the The expense there is $1.3 million. The biggest expense is close to $1 million for the Ottawa County auditor fees, and then about $168,000 for our bus and road insurance. Transfers, the big one that sticks out is a $25 million transfer from last year. The rest of the transfers are for our food service fund, our uniform school supplies fund, our termination benefits fund, summer school, we've been increasing that, our annual turf replacement, and the athletics. General fund summary. This graph that I like, it kind of just shows where revenues are in comparison to expenditures. Total revenues for this fiscal year, total revenues are about $4.1 million higher than expenditures. Next year, expenditures are about $1.2 million higher. 26 expenditures are about $2.6 million higher. 2027, expenditures are about 4.6, and 2028 about $6 million. And this assumes with the renewal levy. Without it, then that just orange graph is slightly higher. To summarize, this year, if the revenues and expenditures play out, we'll finish the year with about $4.1 million of revenues over expenditures. That will be a $48.1 million unencumbered balance. When I present the 5-year forecast when I submit the 5-year forecast to the state, we have to assume that the renewals are not renewed, and then they're added back on the bottom. So if not renewed, next year we'll have a $6 million expenses over revenues, which would decrease the cash balance to $42 million in 2026. The full renewal will be out, as next year will only be half a renewal. About $12.3 million, expenses over revenues of $29.8. In 27, that'll be about $14.4 million of expenses over revenues of $15.4 million. And then 2028, we'll have a gap of $20 million with a we'll end the year, which we can't, but predict a deficit of $4.6 million. And then adding the renewals back in. And I will add in 2028, it's just not the current 2019 renewal, it's the first year that the other renewal that we have will come off the books as well. And then if we add the renewals back in, next year we'll have a deficit spend of $1.2 million, then 26 of $2.6 million, 27 of $4.6, and 28 of 0.6, and ending in 28 with a $33.7 million cash balance. And this is just a graph that we've shown over time to kind of just summarize the two different comparisons with the renewal levy versus not the renewal levy. So as you can see here, with the renewal levy, we'll have 2028 with $35.7 million, and then without it, and this is before encumbrances, we'll be deficit spending by $12 to $20 million, and then 2028 will be a deficit of $2.5 million. Just to kind of summarize before we wrap up, Strongsville City Schools has maintained an operating surplus since 2011. As a government entity, our school district is required to operate in the positive. Operating a deficit could result in the following declarations by both the Ohio Department of Education and/or the Auditor of State's Office of fiscal caution, fiscal watch, or a fiscal emergency. To be removed from one of these categories, the school district must demonstrate fiscal stability by eliminating current deficits and avoiding future deficits. So what that means is before they eliminate anyone from, and this isn't just school districts, from any government entity that's declared in one of these positions, what that means is they must eliminate any current deficits and avoid future deficits, is what they want to see is in these out years. Surpluses, not negatives, before they release them from one of those categories. At the close of fiscal year 23, the ending cash balance within the general fund was $46.1 million. During fiscal year 23, through the work and recommendation of the district's finance committee, a group comprised of local community members and business professionals, the Board of Education adopted a new cash balance reserve policy to address minimums and maximums with the general operating fund. During the adoption of this policy, the board approved the general operating fund transfer of $25 million to a capital projects fund for future capital projects. And then the May 2024 5-year forecast for the general operating fund for fiscal year 24 estimates revenues of $90.3 million and estimated expenditures of $86.2. This equates to the estimated revenues over estimated expenditures of $4.1 million. And additional budget details could be found on our monthly reports on how we track the forecast to our month end. And kind of stated in that first part about fiscal caution, fiscal watch, one of the benchmarks they use is where you're at with cash, and then also revenue surplus or shortfall based on percentage. As we start deficit spending in those future years, we fall into that yellow section of the bar chart, which to them would raise a flag of caution. We wouldn't get identified to them yet unless we hit one of those pink or red areas, and this assumes with the renewal levy. So without the renewal levy, we would dip in one of those red categories, and we'd be on their radar. Cash balance policy, kind of touched on it. The board believes that maintaining cash reserve unencumbered unreserved balance of 90 days of operating expenditures is necessary in the interest of sound fiscal management. The board affirms that tax levies must be pursued and/or district finances otherwise managed to ensure general fund operating fund unencumbered unreserved cash balance equates to at least 90 days of operating expenditures. Further, when a general fund cash balance exceeds 150 days, the superintendent and/or treasurer may recommend the funds be transferred to an approved 070 Capital Projects Fund for future capital improvements as approved by the board. The transfer must be approved by the board and cannot result in the general operating fund cash balance falling below the 90 days in any year of the rolling 5-year forecast. So how we're doing in that benchmark, cash days on hand with renewals. In 2022, we had about 305 days when we made the recommendation for the $25 million transfer. It brought us down to 211 days. This year, if the cash balance stays where it's at, we'll finish the year of 213 days, and then in the future years, as we begin to deficit spend, it'll be 196 all the way down to 131 days in 2028, so above the 90-day benchmark. Looking at that, if without the renewal, as the chart on the left, the green is with the cash balance with the green in the renewal. The yellow is without it, so you can see how that gap increases in the out years. And then in the graph to the right is the cash days without the renewal. Next fiscal year, we'd have 177 cash days versus the 196. And then you'll see as it gradually decreases in the out years, where 2028, looking at a slight deficit. In 27, we'll be at 66 cash days, which is below the 90-day minimum. And then this is the last slide. Necessity of cash balances in Ohio. School officials must plan and monitor district cash flow as they practice responsible stewardship. The district's 5-year forecast is an informed prediction on how long the revenue expense cycle will maintain a healthy cash balance. The revenue of surplus or deficit line within the 5-year forecast provides a picture of the district's changing fiscal obligations over time, pointing to the need for a fund balance in the preparation for future expenses. Reasons why a district may carry a cash balance at the end of the fiscal year. One is cash flow. Main sources of revenue is property taxes, which is received 5 out of the 12 months of the fiscal year. Need a cash balance to sustain the low cash periods of December, January, the first payroll in February, the month of June, and also the first payroll in July to meet the obligations in those months. As for those that have been here in the lean years of 2010, 11, and 12, the district was borrowing, making short-term loans to make payroll obligations as they received that first tax advance in February. So it kind of cycles. We only receive property taxes 5 times out of the year. A small advance in January, a larger advance in February, and a small settlement in March. And then July, a small advance and a larger settlement in August. Then you have to make that cash last throughout those remaining months until the next advance comes. And December, January, and early February are low months, as well as the end of June and beginning of July. Levy cycle, since levies are limited to a fixed dollar amount, tax revenues may not keep up with increases in operating costs, particularly when expenditures typically increase 3 to 5% annually. Expenditure volatility, staffing needs. Over the past 2 years, the general fund staff increased by 40 positions due to increasing enrollment, coupled with additional support for student needs. Healthcare, volatility there. Over the last couple of years, we've seen an 8.7% increase, a 15% increase, and then this year was a 3%. And then our credit score and bond rating. Over the past several years, the district's bond rating has received 2 credit rating upgrades from Moody's, from a AA3 to a AA1. As a result, the increased bond rating, the district was able to refinance outstanding debt at a lower tax rate, which reduced the district's debt obligation by $20 million, a direct savings of $30 per 100,000 evaluation to the taxpayers over the life of the debt. And that concludes the presentation, if there's any questions.
I have one, George. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. I don't think you need to pull anything specific up, but you mentioned a couple times, like I averaged the last 3 years for one thing and one was 10. How do you determine how many years to use as to average?
Based on the data that's there, like for example, the public utility, that's the one I took 10 years. And the reason for that is just more data there for that one. And it's kind of been consistent on how it's been increasing over that lifetime. For others, like a 5-year average. For the healthcare, I took the 5-year average. Really with COVID, it kind of skewed it, so I was trying to get away prior to COVID years, and this is just kind of looking at more of the current years as those have been more relevant for those. So just kind of the relevant of whether going 10 years or the 3 years based on that category.
So there's not an industry standard, you just take what you have and
Yeah, I just took
work
what I
with
thought
it.
would make sense.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, for the healthcare, the industry standard, they told me to take the 8 to 10%, which I've been doing that, and it's kind of been all over the place. So I was like, if it's going to be volatile like that, let me take the last 5 years and just see what it is for that. And I even asked our folks, hey, does this make sense? And they kind of agreed. It's kind of one of those things where it's based on our claim, so you never know what's going to happen with healthcare.
I think from a principle, the goal is to be as close as we can be without being too far in either direction. The consequences of being wrong, if we underestimate, we then have expenses that we didn't anticipate. If we overestimate, we then have, in a way, the temptation is if we overestimate, bully for us, we came under our estimate, but it also means that we're not getting an accurate picture. And as elected officials, our job is to make decisions based on an accurate picture. One of the things that I want to be real clear in the question, the assumptions have effects. So you're making predictions. They're, I think, informed predictions.
Right.
Whether they're conservative or controlled, that idea you want, in some instances you want to overestimate and you want the dollar amount to come in lower. When we estimate construction projects, we want to have the max, we want those dollars to come in below, because the alternative is we can't pay for it, right? But in this situation, when we overestimate expenses, it means that the dollar amount at the end of the 5-year forecast is lower than it could be.
Right.
Which hopefully the arithmetic being taught in the elementary school, they would say, well, yeah, of course, it's addition and subtraction. But do you have any comments on, are we overestimating our expenses and therefore the ending balance is worse?
Right. Are we overestimating our the ending balances? So let me understand the question. Are we overestimating as the ending balance worse?
Let's do easy numbers. If I'm predicting I'm going to have $10 in the kitty in 5 years, but I'm expecting income of $10 and expenses of $9, I get there. But if I know ahead of time my expenses are actually going to be $5, I should be doing the $5 because then I'm not predicting I don't have any money left.
Right.
I'm actually saying, in a way, I'm cooking the books. Am I
So-
making sense?
Yeah, so we're forecasting based on, the out years is based on our budget. And our budget is based on, as we mentioned, is 80% of salary benefits. So we've already talked about how that's calculated. Any changes there could have a cumulative effect. For example, like healthcare. Last time we had a 8% factor in there. It was 3%. So that had a cumulative effect. Year over year over the 5-year forecast. For the purchase services and the materials and supplies, for this year, it's based on how we're trending out the rest of the year. The next 4 years is based on our budget. One, can we afford what we're budgeting? If we come under that estimate, if for whatever reason, I'm going to pick on Dave with technology, for example, we have budgeted $600,000 for Chromebooks. In the forecast, it has $600,000. Well, in 2 years, he might only spend $550, so we save $50,000. But at least we knew we could afford the $600. So we don't want to budget more than what we can't afford. So in that sense, we're hoping to see savings as well, because you don't want to have it the other way where you're forecasting. You're forecasting, I don't know, $100 of revenue and $100 expenses, and then you bring in $90 of revenue. Now you have a $10 shortfall. With a school district like us, when 80% of our expenses are people, you can't make cuts during the year. So you'd rather be right with the savings or you'd rather be wrong with the savings versus wrong with an overage. Because with that, if in the lean years, that's hard to make up because you can't make reductions during the school year. Does that make that answer?
That makes really good sense. I mean, we've said this a number of times different ways. If a school district, if Strongsville is in a situation where they have to make cuts, when you're a people business, there really is only one thing you can cut.
Right.
And that's people.
Right.
You don't have to go far in the news to look at Cleveland State, to look at Akron, to look at any of our higher education universities that Baldwin Wallace, they all have multi-million-dollar budget shortfalls, and the way they're addressing them is cuts to staff.
Right.
And if we were in that same situation, that would be what we would have to do. It's what we've done before. We've all been through that history. I will close it by saying once again, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The 5-year forecast does take quite a bit of time. The time is well worth it because it gives us, again, an imperfect tool, but the tool, I don't want to say it's the best tool. I think we could come up with better tools,
Right.
but it's the tool we're required to use. And since we're required to use it, I appreciate that you take the time to make it as informed and valuable as possible. And then for the audience and for everyone else and for my fellow board members, we are in the best financial position the school district has been in that I know of, that I can remember, recent history, whatever you want to call. There are many of us in this room who remember and went through when we weren't in that condition. In a way, this is much harder to manage. It is much easier to manage. We're not going to buy that because we don't have the money. The challenge for the school board, the challenge for the district is, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do tomorrow? And what are we going to plan to be able to do 20, 30 years from now? And that is one way that I think the school board and the district doesn't look at this particular levy. Yes, we look at that levy, Yes, we have to make decisions on that levy, but it's not in just one levy. It's a continuum, and it's a direction that we want this district to go in. And that direction is positive, and I will say out loud, everybody wants that direction, by and far. I don't think anybody's out there wanting to say, I want the district to tank. So any other specific questions, or else I'm going to suggest we've...
Questions from the committee?
Yes. We have 3 committees here. Are there any questions you have of the forecast? So I will say that our normal practice has been for the Finance Committee to get an advance copy or an advance review of the 5-year forecast. But because of time and wanting to have this conversation in a wider audience, we pulled that Finance Committee forward. So I want to thank the School Board Finance Committee for making the time to join us. And we will close the 5-year forecast discussion. Next steps, we're going to vote on it at our next board meeting.
Correct.
To adopt it.
Correct.
So if anybody has any holes in it, you have 2 weeks to tell us. Thanks very much, George.
Yep, thank you for everyone for being here. Appreciate it. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, George. Next up, are we on master planning discussion?
We are. Thank you, Mr. Micko. We want to continue our discussion from last meeting about our master staffing plan. As a reminder, we spent 4 or so months collaborating with our staff, looking holistically about where we're at, what we need, and where we want to go. And we've divided a staffing plan to look at current positions we want to maintain, positions we want to add next year, and then there's a couple other categories that will be maybe add in the future, different concepts, as well as things that we're not interested, ideas that we were not interested in at this time. So last time the board gave clear direction on maintaining the current positions. And so what we want to do is loop back. George, if you can click on the Add Next Year tab. I've already previewed these for the board last time, and just to kind of give context to what is on the screen. These are all of the positions that I am recommending to the board that we add next year, positions or adjustments to current positions that we have. So again, just as a frame of reference and to give context to the conversation, altogether there were 75 staffing recommendations that were made. Of those that I'm recommending to add next year are 13 of those. So again, these positions and these recommendations were taken from the ideas that were shared from staff and filtered through a variety of thought processes to get it down to what we thought was necessary. So that 75 became 13 that are recommended in the Add Next Year tab. The couple color coding things that you see here, the rows that are highlighted in green are things that were recommended to be added next year, and we've already moved forward with those because of timing and necessity of those. So the preschool principal and the 2 intervention specialists at the middle school are in process to be hired. The white cells, those are the unhighlighted cells. Those are ones that I'm going to need direction from the board on, and they're just unhighlighted because the cost is significantly less than some of the other positions, as well as just as adjustments to days to be more efficient and effective, address the needs that our staff doing the work is suggested would be beneficial for efficiency and effectiveness considerations, and we also agree with those recommendations. The ones highlighted in blue are similar, that these are ones that the board has to give direction on. But they are either new positions, and therefore they have a little more of a cost to them, or for row 10, although that's not a new position, it's got, row 9, although those are not new positions, those are additional hours, but because of health benefits, based on those hours, that would bump them through. It has a more significant cost than other ones. So I just kind of highlighted the blue and the unhighlighted ones differently for you. So what I would recommend for the board, I've highlighted all these positions in the past. If you want me to go into any more detail this time, I'd be more than happy to do that. But what I request from the board at this meeting is if there's positions that you feel comfortable that we can move forward with, I would like that consensus to say, hey, Cameron, here's the ones we feel good about. Go ahead and do the work to make it a reality. If there's ones that the board is completely not supportive of, we don't have consensus for that, then I think it's good at this time. It's early May, mid-May. If we're not going to move forward, now is the time to know. And I'd appreciate that clarity of this is not something the board's interested in at this time. And then the middle category would be if there's anything that, hey, we're on the fence with, we're not sure, we'd like a little more information or details, please let me know and what those details are, and I can get those to you, and we can make decisions at a future meeting. So, Mr. Micko, with that, I'll turn it back over to you for discussion.
Does anyone have burning questions?
I just have one. With the office support, the clerical one, if we're adding these days, does that change the contracts in any way?
For the ones that we're adding the days, so there's a couple different ones that are there. So this is a process. When you take a look at, and Jenny, jump in if I say anything correct. When you take a look at adding days to positions, there is an HR process that we have to go through with the union to adjust that position. And we've done that in the past for certain things. The only one that this really wouldn't impact is, let me see here, is row 5. So row 5 would be one where we would have to decide, is this something we want to add these days to every secretary no matter what? That would be the same process of we'd have to go through some HR processes with the union to do that. If we're just saying, hey, you can work these additional days with administrative approval via timesheet, that would be different. And that's, I've surveyed the building secretaries, and there is variability in what they feel that they need. So based on the direction of the board, I could figure out either a specified number of days that I think that would be beneficial for all, or via timesheet and administrative approval for those additional days. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a preference? What would make it work better?
What would make it work better is the principals being able to work specifically based on building needs, and that they would be able to collaborate with their secretary to say, here's what I think is needed.
There's 2 easy ones here for me. Instructional coach, we already have that. We're just morphing it into what our current needs are. That's an easy one for me. I say make that change. Similarly with technology, it's my understanding, if I understood Dave correctly, we're already paying those employees extra over the summer anyway to get work done. So this makes sense. We're already doing it. Let's change the contract to match what we need anyhow. That's what I've got so far.
I don't know if the question's for Cameron or Jenny. Tell me what a additional high school counselor and an additional middle school counselor is going to get me. Or better yet, is going to get our students and or the parents of our students.
So the first thing that jumps out to me for both buildings, high school and middle school, is, we have some regulations and some things we need to do with students at risk, and looking at that data and making sure that we are meeting with them on a regular basis these are students that we have certain criteria like attendance, grades, just engagement in the school. And I think that has been not able to be done on a regular basis. It takes time, to meet with these students and to go over plans and communicate with parents. And I just feel like that's been lacking, especially this year. To look at the data, we know who they are, but then to follow up and provide that extra support to them, I think has been lacking. So for me, that's one big one. I think the high school, I will commend Susan Harb and the counselors, the current counselors. They've done a wonderful job with adding that career component and creating some opportunities for students to be more engaged in careers and their pathways and provide them more exposure to different things, but it's been done, at a minimal level for all kids, I would say. There's certain groups that we've been a little bit more, paid more attention to, but I think for all kids, they really deserve more opportunities to explore the different options that they might have in the future, and I think that is something that the high school could definitely use. And then, I would say on a regular basis, we get, student alerts, we get anonymous reporting of students needing extra help and assistance. It probably happens, I don't know, Cameron, we get those like once a week at least, where we're looking into different student needs, and it takes time. It takes time to call the parents, to meet with the students, to follow up, and I just think more attention can be paid to kids at risk and that need more help. So that would be my thought.
Yeah, additionally, I would share that, when I met with the counseling staff and talked to them, I talked to the high school staff, and Andy's worked with the middle school staff on my behalf. We've talked about if we're going to add these positions, we are not going to just redistribute the work by a larger denominator, an increase by one, that we were going to address needs that we have that currently are not being addressed because of the volume of student needs that are there. As well as the number of the staffing that we have. So some specific things that we see are lacking in addition to what Jenny said is we take a look at small group counseling support. So right now we do a pretty good job at offering classroom-based counseling lessons at the middle school and high school, but we do not do a good job of providing small group supports and counseling simply because of the staffing needs that are there. So some concrete things at the high school, in addition to what Jenny said, is Strongsville Academy is our online programming. Those students are the students that are at risk that Jenny's talking about that really are individualized with their needs, so more time and attention to put there. They're looking at bringing back lunch and learns, bi-weekly lunch and learns with students on topics that are critical to them and their success. They have a teen mental health ambassador program that they're looking to expand. And then again, they used to have study tables. They used to have trainings for teachers, Naviance, which is our kind of career and college pathway program. The success plans are the official terms of what Jenny was saying with the kind of the record keeping. So those would be additional things that they're not able to do simply because of the staffing levels. At the middle school focus, again, in addition to what we've shared, would focus heavily on how we can support student mental health needs and student behavior at the middle school through the various tiers of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, as the board knows, those levels of students that need that behavior support, as well as supporting students that are on 504s, the success plans, as we've talked about. We have social workers that are at the middle school and high school, providing more collaboration and coordination between those parties. And one of the things that's become more complex is coordination with outside therapy agencies and students that are getting private therapy. And we've got to create a better bridge between outside of school services and in-school services for the fact of how are we speaking the same language and how can we best support the student and have a collaboration there. So those are some of the ways that the counselors would be used that are directly going to impact students at both buildings.
So going back to students at risk, is there, and everything doesn't have to be measured, someone told me, but is there a way to benchmark or baseline? Because if we're saying that we want to address these needs, is there a way we can benchmark it, whether it's, number of referrals, number of students who need the services, et cetera, and set that benchmark now so that 2 years from now, well, we'll do it next year, but 2 years to get a decent data set, we can say this is the benefit of having those people.
Yeah, I think when we take a look at the student success plans, there's a variety of criteria we use as to why a student would be placed on that plan. And it's academics, it's test scores, it's attendance, our behavior, some of the key factors. So yeah, I think one of the things that I would suggest is let's take a look at the students, the criteria for being identified as a student at risk. Let's take a look at ones where we want to provide some targeted areas of focus. Like, for example, at the middle school, attendance is a challenge there. As we take a look at our habitually truant rate, it's more significant at the middle school than any other building. So we could say, hey, we are going to provide these services through the additional counselor in collaboration with the building and the administration to try and address and get our attendance rate better. So, when we're talking with human beings, it's not a direct correlation, right, between everything, but I think those are things. Build a theme, have somebody to oversee it, let's target our interventions and supports to try and improve globally in an area, and we could see, do we have less students on success plans because of attendance needs moving forward? As well as, I think it's an important piece of it, and not to get into the weeds, but when you take a look at attendance needs, there's a lot of reasons why a student may or may not be attending, and a lot of those needs, I think, could be supported by a school counselor.
Some things you can say X will result in Y.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be too cavalier. We already have state indicators. We have a 5-year graduation rate. If we can do something to bring that down, that benefits us. I don't want to assume anything. Yeah. You're the ones that are closer to it. But I think it behooves us to say, we're predicting the additional people will aid us in this. Because the converse is, we all have anecdotal stories in the news of, whether it be a social worker, and the problem with the social worker is their caseload. They have to manage, whatever it is, 500 people. Mm-hmm. You can't possibly do your job managing 500 people. But that's not the situation we're in. We've already said we're not spreading the existing load. We're addressing new situations. Mm-hmm. So I think I think it would be useful and relevant to me to have, let's set that benchmark so that we can see, are we having the effect? Mm-hmm. And then the only other one is to give some thought to whether it's these specific additional counselors or the counselor team in general, but how can we help parents? We're very focused on teachers, we're very focused on third parties, but I think we should be, if time is that issue, let's focus on how do we help something as simple as communicating with parents. Can we use these new counselors to do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Anybody else have any general questions? So to guide our discussion.
I have one more.
Of course.
Educational aids, so this is the first of the two. I can't see what line it is at the moment. It says increase positions to 6.75 hours. Can you just remind me of what they're at now?
They're all a little bit different. So Jenny, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so we've been slowly, per the contract, we're permitted to increase their time, like if needed. So, we've had certain situations in certain buildings where we've had additional students. At Whitney, we were a little creative with the educational aid. We couldn't find a monitor, so she took on those hours. So we didn't replace the monitor. So just to answer your question, I would say I think we have one at 5, one at 6.
I found it, Jenny.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they range.
They do range. So yes, we have one at 5.25, one at 6.25, one at 6.25, another one at 6.25, and one at 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So the difference is once you become a 6.5-hour employee in our district with our contract, there's a different benefits level. So if you take a look at those hours and put them in context, 6.75 hours gets you to be there the entire student day.
Yeah.
I think with the mobile units, I won't call them trailers, with the mobile units that are going to be at the majority of the elementaries, there's just going to be additional needs because of traffic in general. Mm-hmm. Does anybody have anything that sticks in their craw that they can't support? I lied. Can you give me some background on the EL teacher and the need?
Yeah, so we have, it's one of our largest growing populations of students here is our English learners. And so one of the things that we have seen is based on that increasing student population and based on when students come here that don't speak English, they take a test, OTELA,
Yeah.
OTELA test, And they range on a number scale, I think, from 1 to 5, from, emerging English speaker to, just learning, non-speaking, or just learning the language. So based on that, we have to provide certain services to support students. And there's specific teachers that need to provide those services, and they have to have a specific license to do that, to help build vocabulary, comprehension. So it's interesting to note that our EL teachers do not speak or are not translators, right? They teach students the foundations of language and how to understand and recognize the English language, and do that in acclimation of the class. So what we are seeing is our caseloads. If you take a look at it, our current EL teachers have certain caseloads at the elementary level, and those caseloads are being maxed out based on current needs, and therefore that's the recommendation for the additional positions. So if you bear with me for a second. With the addition, right now, if we take a look at the secondary level, we are averaging, if you take a look at what we're projecting next year from here's currently about what we have to, based on using a metric like George to say, hey, every year we get an increase of 10 to 15% of students. So the middle school is ranging from services of students that they have about 45 to 60 student range. So with the teachers that are currently there, they're ranging in the upper 20s to low 30s per teacher. That's their caseload. If we don't make any changes at the elementary school and we keep with the 3 teachers, their caseloads are going to range from 60 to 72 students per teacher. If we add the 4th one, you're down to 45 to 54 per Aaron. That's a good, even though it's a high number, that's workable at the elementary school, and that puts you about in the, it puts you a little higher than the elementary school, but in the same range as the high school. And so based on where the student needs are and kind of the testing, that's what they've recommended. And based on the numbers, I think that's gets it into an equitable stance.
Is the English language teacher, is that a state requirement, or is that a choice on how we approach it?
I don't believe it's a state requirement.
Okay. I'm just, and this is not something to discuss now, but I'm just, as our populations increase, at what point do we say maybe we have enough of a particular language that we need a different strategy, or what have you?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I still scratch, bottom line is I still scratch my head that we have someone who doesn't know English, and we have someone who doesn't know whatever that person's language is.
Right.
Google is a wonderful thing, so.
I will also add, we also have Title III dollars from the state, they're federal funds that Aaron uses for translator services, and it's dependent on the specific language of the student.
I just, again, well, George knows my background, and I know George's background. It's like, at some point, you have enough that you have a cohort, and you hire someone who knows the language to do a fast immersion. But that could be Pollyannish. Does anybody have any board members have anything they're unsupportive of? No, make it so.
All right, I will. Thank you very much. Before I move on, if I may, Mr. Micko, I thought it's not on the agenda, but give an update on mobile units.
Please.
So mobile units, as you know, we have one currently at Chapman. Based on board direction at a prior meeting, we have 6 more mobile units coming. So that will put 2 at every elementary school, except Kinsner would have 1 and Whitney would have none because of the room utilization that's there. So as you take a look at the gifted units, the mobile units that are there, based on past board discussions, there was guidance of, hey, we would prefer that students are not out there all day. I support that recommendation. And we also made sure that there's no students that receive special education. There's no special education classrooms in the mobile units. So if you take a look at, I would just say like mobile unit 1. For all of our buildings that have 1 mobile unit, you're going to have gifted math in one of those classrooms. And to clarify, there's 2 classrooms and 1 mobile unit. So you're going to have gifted math in one of those. And then you're going to have a variety of different small group supports, Title I, EL services, things like that we've talked about. Kinsner is looking to use it for small group as well as band orchestra. They can coordinate the side so the noise won't be an issue. And then, the other mobile unit that we have, that's going to be at Chapman and Moraski specifically, they have a variety of different things that help alleviate space needs in the building. So if you take a look at gifted math and small group support, it's not opening up classrooms. It's moving supports that were in less desirable areas, vestibules, smaller rooms, principals' offices, things of that nature, in the vestibule, in the hallway, and moving them into a dedicated space that are best for kids. So as we take a look at all of the buildings, we're able to do that. We're able to meet the board expectations of kids not being in there all the time, not special education classrooms out there, and alleviate some of the congestion and less desirable spaces in the building. There's one building that I just want to loop back and have the board start to think about, and that's Sarar. So Sarar is a building where one of the things we talked about is, hey, if we're going to do 2 mobile units at the buildings, one of the things we may need to consider is expanding our parameters. Because Sarar is going to have 2 additional grade level sections that need a full classroom next year. Every classroom at Sarar is being utilized this year. There's no open rooms. Next year, we will be bringing back half-day kindergarten, which needs its own room, and we are adding a section of first grade, correct? First grade. So that's going to need its own room. So the question is, we need 2 full-size classrooms. Putting gifteds in the media center, small group supports are all over the place. That doesn't free up a classroom. Kindergarten and first grade are not going to go out in the mobile units. So one thing we discussed as an idea last time was 5th grade. And so 5th grade would be a good opportunity to go out in mobile units for a variety of the oldest kids, there's no bathrooms or water in the mobile units. And so, they'd be best to handle some of those things. And so if you take a look at Sarar, putting 2 5th grade classrooms out in one mobile unit opens up 2 classrooms in the building. That gives us the space that's needed. However, the challenge is that Sarar is one of our buildings that has moderate intensive, we support students with moderate intensive needs, and we have multiple classrooms, and we want to ensure that we have equitable classrooms for our moderate intensive students, as we do for students in the general education setting. That's been a little bit challenging this year. One of the things also that we have to look at is, if you take a look at supporting the needs of all kids, as well as our students with disabilities, a sensory room is a key aspect, and we have them in a lot of our buildings, all of our buildings that have moderate intensive needs students, but having adequate space to utilize that is also necessary. So there is a need to have a 3rd classroom be in the mobile unit to free up the space that's necessary for special education services, sensory room, et cetera. Make sense so far? So the question is this. So if that's going to be the case, I understand nobody wants to be out in the mobile unit, right? I mean, it's a nice classroom. We're going to do a virtual, kind of a virtual tour of them so people could see. But I understand, hey, 5th grade, let's go to the mobile units. It's not that exciting of a thing to finish off your elementary career. But somebody has to go out there to make room for the needs that we have in the building. So we have 3 5th grade sections at Sarar. There is the option of putting all 3 5th grade sections in the mobile units. There's a variety of positives to that. There's a variety of negatives to that. As you take a look at the average 5th grade schedule, that would put the average 5th grader would be in the mobile unit for about 2 hours at a time. Then they'd come in for their special. 2 hours at a time, they'd come in for lunch and recess, and then 2.5 to 3 hours, you're back in the mobile unit before you end the day. So you also have to think about the organization within the school, right? So you put the 3 5th grade classrooms out in the mobile unit. They're all next to each other. They all switch classes. They're all out in the same area. You say, okay, well, maybe we have 1 class, and this is what we originally talked about, right? You have 1 5th grade class in the building, 2 out in the mobile units. That way they're in the building more than they would be with all of them out there. You then have to look at, okay, the mobile units at Sarar have to be in the place they're in because of electric and because of the gas line on the other side. So then That side of the building over there is kindergarten and first grade, if I'm going by memory. If we don't put fifth grade somewhere in that vicinity, then we've got travel time and going through the buildings. And so those are just some kind of internal moves. So what I would share with the board, if you want to have any discussion now, we can discuss now. If you need to think about it, think about it. But we need 3 grade level classrooms to be out in the mobile unit. That's the only way that it's going to work at Sarar. Let me put an asterisk on that. That's the only way it's going to work if we don't adjust internal spaces in other ways. You know, there are options that are out there. When you take a look at big spaces, there's options of what do you do with the media center? What do you do with the gym? But that's the lunchroom or the multi-purpose room. So those are really the 2 spaces that you could look at. Could we put classrooms in there if you wanted to? But that's kind of a, hey, that's an option. But in terms of if we want to use those spaces as intended, we want the multi-purpose room to be for lunch and for physical education. We want the media center to be for the media center purposes. Then 3 classrooms have to go outside. And within the parameters, it's 2 fifth grades and somebody else. And probably that somebody else would be a 4th grade. Or 3 fifth grades out there. So those are things. I've had to expand the parameters of the board a little bit just because of the practical considerations when you take a look at each individual building. I'm within the parameters for Chapman, Kinsner, and Moraski. Sarar's the one where I'm going to need some board direction or consensus on, or just, hey, Cameron, figure it out and go do it, whichever of those you prefer. But wanted to give an update, and Mr. Micko, however you'd like to proceed from here is your discretion.
So it wasn't fair to try to, I mean, this is very recent, so when Cameron and I discussed the topic, I'm like, we need to discuss it. We need to discuss it in a board meeting because we need to let, if nobody else, know the parents of the current 4th and 3rd graders at Sarar, but mull it over and follow up. If there's any burning questions, we can ask them now, but I think we just need to mull it over, and, you know, Cameron's charge is to come up, if there are any options, to come up with those options.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg's been a principal for how long? He should be able to pull a rabbit out of his hat before he leaves. Because the poor new principal, oh boy. But
And just for the public and for the board, Emily, who's the new principal, and Greg have worked hand in hand with this. So it was important to Greg and to me that she came into a situation where she was a part of the process. So they have been working diligently and providing a variety of options.
I was just going to offer, Cam and I chatted yesterday, and one of the things I asked him to look into, and I'm eagerly awaiting, the response was, what happens if we move the media center out to a trailer? Is there enough space to make 3 classrooms? That does resolve, at least for 1 year, a potential of putting all the 3 outside. So just one option we hadn't considered yet, and I want to make sure we eliminate all of them before we move forward.
And I think that, you know, I'm glad to hear that Greg and Emily are working together, and that we know that Emily's going to inherit this as her introduction to Strongsville City Schools. I would just share that, you know, with the public, you know, obviously we're doing everything we can, but at some point there are no good choices, but we will make them in concert with the parents to make the best bad decision we can make. So hopefully that's a nicer way to say it. Well, thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, and that concludes my report.
And I've lost the agenda.
Consent calendar, I believe.
We did Raptor. We did potential graduates. We had Jenny's report. But we are on the consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means all items appearing in this agenda denoted as type action, which constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any otherwise? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries. Board of Education other, do we have any board others? Hearing none. We do have reason for executive session on the topics of,
To consider the employment of a public employee, to consider the discipline of a public employee, and to prepare for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, we will enter into executive session at 9:05. We have no anticipation of further business. I do want to take the time to thank the members of our audience for attending, especially the members of our Finance Committee, our Facilities Committee, and the Strongsville GOP Finance Committee. We do our work best when everyone's paying attention and can offer their insights, so I thank them for that. And I thank the public for watching, and have a nice evening. And on Sunday, we have commencement. Or no, a week from Sunday. No, I have a commencement on Saturday. And, oh, good call. So a week from Sunday, May 20th, we have,
19.
I'm all over the place. May 19th, we have commencement. And as Haley pointed out, our next board meeting, which is always one that I think is fun, is our retirement celebration. And I look forward to hearing Jenny tell us about all of our retirees.
It's my birthday that day. Do you have a pizza party?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice evening.